Here is your weekly rate update. Bear with me. This one's going to be long because we're going to be covering the Fed meeting last week. So the Fed left rates unchanged as expected, and they released their summary of economic projections. The median number of Fed cuts this year remained at 2, but there was some movement. And now 7 of the Fed members are expecting 0 Fed cuts this year. The Fed downgraded their view on the economy. Now they're expecting 1.4% GDP growth, which is down from 1.7. They also think the unemployment rate will go from 4.2 to 4.5. Lastly, they raised their core PCE inflation expectations, and they think it will rise from 2.5% to 3.1%. Powell said the reason for the higher inflation forecast is that he thinks tariffs are likely going to cause prices to rise in the coming months. However, the Fed Governor Waller believes that the Fed should be cutting rates as soon as next month. He said the Fed should look past the impact of tariffs because historically, one-time events like this don't cause persistent inflation and they fade quickly. He took a shot at the Fed by saying they always talk about long and variable lags, and he thinks they should be cutting next month because the labor market is getting weaker than they'd like, and they shouldn't wait for it to collapse before acting. So initial jobless claims that came out last week, they've been elevated for 4 weeks in a row, and that trend may continue and worsen, especially when contemplating the recent spike in WARN, W-A-R-N notices. So large companies are required to issue WARN notices at least 60 days in advance of mass layoffs. And the latest data shows there were almost 46,000 of them in May. This has only been matched by the Great Financial Crisis and the COVID lockdowns. So as a result, there may be more layoffs and the job picture getting weaker. All the more reason the Fed should probably start cutting rates. But anyway, let's talk about news this week. Today, existing home sales is coming out. Tomorrow, the Case-Shiller Home Price Index and the FHFA House Price Index. Wednesday, we got mortgage apps and new home sales. Thursday, initial jobless claims and the GDP, the final Q1 reading, and pending home sales. And then Friday, the PCE. So fingers crossed we get some cuts at some point this year. Hope you have a great week. We'll see you next one.